All right, welcome to the 53rd School16 event. We've been doing these for just about a year and a half now, since the start of the pandemic, with the goal of bringing tech professionals to all of you who can demystify and provide context around what these tech roles are actually like. What does it mean to be a growth marketing manager at these various companies and do marketing at a company like Pandora? We don't often get an inside look from people who are actually in these shoes, unless we know someone maybe in our network, a friend, a brother, a sister, who can tell us what it's like to work at these companies. And that's really what we want folks to come away from in these events, understanding what these roles are like and understanding how people like Katie have navigated their careers and been able to elevate their careers in actually quite a short period of time. I want to go really quickly here through the agenda. We're doing the introduction right now. We're going to wrap up in about a minute. We'll hear a quick introduction from Katie. And the bulk of this discussion is going to be career oriented. If you've come to our events in the past, you'll know that we're really curious about how people think about their careers, why they make certain decisions, when they do make those decisions. Like the one that Anna has made, who put in the chat, that she wants to change a career, or Asia, I believe it was. How do you actually then go through with it? What are the steps that you take to get to the next step? That's going to be the focus of our discussion. We will facilitate a Q&A throughout, so we encourage you to jot down notes and think about what is it that you're curious about along our line of questioning. We do want to make sure that the questions that you ask are oriented around the topic of discussion today, which is a career in tech and also content marketing at companies like Pandora. So please, let's keep our questions focused, but that is going to be the general gist of the conversation if this is your first time here. And we want to make sure you're able to interact with us and with Katie as well throughout in the Q&A, but Vadim and I will be facilitating this conversation throughout this event. I do want to also mention that we have an initial deadline coming up for our Tech Career Acceleration Program. We actually have several members of a current cohort that just kicked off in December that are here at this event today. So welcome, really great to see the faces of the folks that have joined, or not the faces, but I guess the names. I'm seeing some familiar names here from folks in our cohort. This is an 8-week accelerated experience where you get exposed to various roles in tech and actually get to work on projects to understand what it's like to do marketing, sales, operations, and product management, and really understand the business side of technology. So if that's something you're interested in breaking into and you want to work with some of the amazing people that we have here on this slide, people that are career professional, career coaches that can help you make that next step. We're actively recruiting for our January cohort. It does get more and more competitive as we get closer to the date and get more and more applications. And we always prioritize scholarships and partial scholarships for folks that apply early. So make sure you get an application, and it just takes a couple of minutes, but it gives us an opportunity to get to know who you are. If you're interested in joining that, you can do that at school16.co/apply. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And welcome, Katie, once again. We're really excited to have you here. For the folks that are live at the event, welcome. Thank you for joining us live. And we'll be sending this to everyone that wants to watch the recording. But to start off this conversation, Katie, I'd love to get into your brain a little bit when you were still in college, because you were a psychology major, probably not an easy major to choose. And obviously you're dedicating a lot of your time and work and mental energy to actually doing well in that line of work when you're still in school. And then you ended up in tech. So I'm just wondering, where were you at when you were going through college, when you were maybe in your junior, senior year, thinking about the looming upcoming graduation and getting into the real world? Did you ever see yourself in tech, or how were you thinking about your career at that point in time?
Yeah, so I actually was a politics major at the beginning of college. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. So I did a few pre-law internships at nonprofits. I was really interested in that. But then when I was actually at the internships, I realized I didn't like the day-to-day, and I didn't feel like I was making as much of a change as I would have wanted to. So the beginning of my junior year, I went to NYU, for anyone who doesn't know. And at the beginning of my junior year, I was like, I'm not really enjoying my politics classes. I didn't like my law internship, so I wanted to try something different. And my mom recommended psych to me, actually, psychology. And so I took a couple of those classes and I loved them. Like intro to psych was really fascinating to me. And then as I got more toward graduation. I wasn't exactly sure what career I wanted to get into. And I knew I loved positive psych. There was a class called The Science of Happiness, and I loved that. And I thought I wanted to get into organizational psychology and go into workplaces and, help make the employees like happier and healthier, which I still think is really interesting. But after I graduated, I was in the job market, and I honestly didn't know what job titles to search for. I didn't intend to go into tech. But I moved back to San Francisco after college. So obviously a huge hub for tech. And that was a lot of the roles that I was applying for. And a recruiter reached out to me for a role at Snapchat, and I loved Snapchat at the time. I used it all the time. So I was really excited about that. So I pursued that job opportunity, and that's how I started off in the tech world.
That's interesting, but I'm curious actually. I mean, it sounds like obviously you were interested in these companies, and did you grow up in San Francisco?
So I grew up in New York City primarily, and then I moved to San Francisco for high school. So that's why I moved back there after college. My family was out there. Got
it. So of course, even starting in high school, you're surrounded by a city where you see billboards for Salesforce instead of for, for Sephora, right? So it's a very interesting place to be because everything there is tech oriented and you're already exposed to that. I'm curious, you said that a recruiter reached out to you. How did they have your information? Why do you think they reached out to you for specifically a role at Snapchat, given your concentration in college?
Yeah, so when I started my job search, I was applying, I think on Angel List and LinkedIn and a few different websites. And I wasn't getting interviews I don't know, within a week or something, or a week and a half. And so I reached out to some recruiters. I honestly don't even remember how I found them. Maybe friends had referred me to a couple of agencies. And so there were two recruiters that kept sending me roles in sales, tech sales. And I was doing those interviews and I realized I didn't like sales. It wasn't a fit for me at the time. And so one of these recruiters, she was like, okay, what are you interested in? So I told her, and then she was sending me certain roles and I actually was not interested in them. And I almost told her to stop sending me roles because I was like, she's not sending me stuff I like. I just want to close this door. And someone recommended to me to just, don't close any doors, keep them open, which I highly recommend now because that same recruiter that I almost told to not call me again because I didn't like the role she was sending me, she's the one who called me with the Snapchat role.
Yeah, I think that's so important. It's nuanced, but we're always juggling a million different data points when we're trying to make decisions, especially when you're getting into a new career, you're graduating, you want to make sure you're making the right decision. You think every decision that you're making will either set you up for failure or success, and you think it's permanent, which it's not. But I think it's so, as you said, it's so important to be open to opportunities. Even you weren't interested in sales roles, so that's fine. You decided you don't want to pursue those. But for folks that are on this call that are coming in, let's say without much experience, if you have a recruiter sending you sales roles, take those interviews, get practice interviewing at a big tech company because, you have to go through those interviews before you decide what you like and also get good at them. And I can understand, by the way, why that recruiter was sending you those roles. There's a lot of demand for those roles. They're typically willing to train people at the entry level. So sometimes recruiters will just send you stuff to see if, what will bite. That's the job of a recruiter. It's your job to manage them almost. I'm curious, do you have any sense as to why that recruiter thought you would be a fit for that role at Snapchat, and maybe what made you attractive to Snapchat as a candidate, given that you didn't have much experience?
Yeah, so I think the recruiter, well, I mean, one, I was, 21, I had just graduated from college, so she probably assumed that I was interested in Snapchat. And I also, so I was a psychology major and I ran an experiment my senior year in the psych department. It was my honors thesis. And so I had data analytics background. I also had a marketing internship at NYU. I interned for the entirety of my junior year at NYU Press. So that marketing experience and then data analysis experience and psychology, right, was all helpful for the content role at Snapchat. And then when I got into the interview process with them, well, the first requirement to even let you in the door, you had to have a certain Snapchat score or whatever. So that was number one. But then, once you got, in the door with that general requirement, then yeah, they definitely loved, all three of those things, my psych major, the thesis that I ran, data analysis, and then my marketing internship. And yeah, I ended up using like all of those skills in that role because I was creating content. I made stories on the search feature, which was a huge launch. I worked there for 2017 and it was super fun. And yeah, I analyzed data and I was like seeing what content was performing best. And then I would make stories that I knew our users liked. And then we could also like surface terms and stuff. And I could just see really like what users were engaging with and then create content that they liked and try out new things and then see if users like that or not. So it just kind of combined all of my experience, like with my internships and major.
Got it. That's great. So clearly the background that you have, and actually even your psych major played a role. But I mean, you mentioned that Snapchat score. I didn't even know that that's something that they had. Is that like an internal thing that they use to measure, or do you know your own Snapchat score?
You know, I honestly am not on the app anymore, but I was a heavy user of it for a long time. I think everyone can see their Snapchat score, all users. I can't even tell you where in the app it lives anymore because I haven't used it in a while. But yeah, I think everyone can see it. I don't know if it's on their homepage or if they click into their settings or whatever, but every user has a Snapchat score. And so to apply to the content rule, you had to have a certain Snapchat score. I'm not sure if it's the same for all fields. Like maybe for software engineers, they don't care, but for the content creators, right? They want to know that you're super familiar and engaged with the app so you can create content that other users like you would like.
That makes so much sense. And I think that, if you're going to be, a lot of people want to work at companies like Snapchat or, insert buzzwordy, social media platform here. But if you're going to be applying to that role and you're going to be coming into that interview saying, I love Snapchat, like you kind of have to back that up with actually being an active user of that company. I don't think it's a requirement to get a job for some of the roles, but certainly makes sense for a content role. It is a requirement. Why would they hire you when there's a million other people who are power users who actually understand how to engage with the platform if you didn't have that high score, given that you were going to be on the content team, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. I know this was a couple of years ago, but do you recall how you talked about your internship experience in that interview to convince them that it was relevant, or did you just kind of generally talk about the experience?
Yeah, I vaguely recall. So I definitely did not talk about my law internships because they were not relevant at all. And I'm sure I talked about my junior year working at NYU Press as an online marketing intern. And then my senior year, I was a research assistant in the lab where I was creating my thesis. So I talked about those two roles in the interview. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I think for the online marketing internship, I was calling out how I had to try to like sell books to people on our email list and then create posts on the NYU Press blog and Tumblr accounts to, gain traction and like get users engaged and liking those, which, related then to Snapchat. And then for my thesis work, the data analysis and, running an experiment and seeing like, which arm of the test performed best, that also relates, to looking at the data of the stories and seeing what's hitting with users and not, and then pivoting if it's not working.
Got it. Yeah, it sounds like those were really good experiences. And I think it's so spot on that you just omitted the irrelevant internship experiences and focused on the stuff that they were going to be most curious about so that you can dig deeper and actually show that you had real experience doing that data analysis, real experience doing that stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one other thing to call out for people that are in college here, like I also joined, like just get engaged in whatever you can, like on campus too, because to get that online marketing internship, I remember in the interview, they really loved that I was on like the events committee in my dorm, and maybe my dorm building had like 1,000 people in it or 1,500. I was in New York City, it's a tall building, but yeah, they loved that I had that experience. And that's, I didn't have to, I guess I had to apply technically, but it's like a minor thing, but then it helped me get like a good internship, which helped me get a good job.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and it's anything you can do to get involved, even if it's something that you're volunteering with and you're spending time on during your college career. You can certainly do it after college as well, especially if you live in a city where there's plenty of opportunities to get involved in different organizations. But I agree, that's great. I have to ask before I move on to other parts of your story. Kind of intimidating, I think, to be in the role that you were at, or at least it seems to me, because I've never done it, right after college. Like, how do you even know how to drive how to create content that's going to resonate as part of your job, actually, at a company like Snapchat, when you're just starting out, when you just graduated, how did you figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, great question. So I honestly went into it. So my team started off moderating stories. So we were just getting like when there was enough Snapchats coming from one place, it would generate a story and then we had to go through it and moderate it. So we saw what was popping, but then I became one of the team leads like 3 or 4 months after starting. And so then we were allowed to make stories. I mean, that was our new role, right? To create stories. So I'd already been like seeing what was coming through, and I use Snapchat all the time. So I could see like the highly curated stories. And so I knew what I liked. I'm also like very adventurous and love doing outdoorsy things. So to me, I was like, oh, these stories would be really fun for me. And then I ended up like making, and then one of my bosses was like, oh, that sounds great. Like, why don't you do that? So I tried it out, and then we could see like the real-time data, like the stories that we made, we could see like what was hitting and what was performing best. And so then that helped me then guide new stories. So if something I thought was super cool didn't perform well, like, okay, try something else. But the ones that did perform well, I could iterate off those.
Yeah, certainly having access to that data and being able to interpret it and act on it right away can help you get even better.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned this, and I can see it on your LinkedIn as well, that you went from being content review associate after 4 months, being promoted to lead content review associate. Now, I don't know what the nuances are of what that actual promotion is, but how did that happen so quickly?
Yeah, great question. So our team started off really small. I was one of the first like 7 people in the San Francisco office for the search content team. And we had some people in LA too. And then we grew to like 90 or 100 people. So I was one of the first people on the team. So I was involved in a lot of the discussions, like seeing what was working in the app, and we'd work really closely with the engineers. And then like our, content manager, obviously, on what was working and how we should edit the app. So I have a loud voice, I think. And like, I really enjoyed being in those discussions. So I, just was identified as one of the people to be one of the leads. So then in addition to, moderating, that became like more of a sub part of my job. I made stories. And then I also like gave guidance to the team who was online. Like, so there'd always be one of us, like one of the leads was like in charge of the chat. And then if people had questions on how to moderate things, we would like advise and be like, okay, do this or do that. So yeah, I think just like speaking up and being engaged and excited and bringing ideas to the table were really helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. And speaking of speaking up, I think it's so easy. Not only when you're joining a role right out of college, but like, let's say it doesn't matter how old you are, you're changing careers, you have imposter syndrome, you don't know if you're making the right decisions, you maybe even think that you're not in the place to make suggestions in an organization. I'm curious in an organization, but I think it's so important to be proactive and to be vocal, because again, those are the people that get promotions, right? The people that don't wait to be told what to do, but go out and do stuff. How did you have that imposter syndrome? I'm curious how you were able to mentally even put yourself in a situation where you're being proactive and making suggestions, doing extra work, which obviously got you promoted, versus kind of being waiting to be told what to do from your manager.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was just really excited to join the company because I loved using it, and I was getting to like have a large influence on this product that I used all the time. So I worked definitely like longer hours. No one was telling me to do it, but I was just excited and I wanted to, produce good work. And then when we were in, which I know like at Pandora too, that helped me get promoted quickly, like working extra. But it was genuinely just because I was excited, like in my new roles. And then in terms of like, being at the table and stuff at Snapchat, honestly, and having a voice at the table, it wasn't intimidating to me, honestly, at Snapchat. Like it was a really young company. And I'm sure it probably is now too, but I haven't worked there since, 2017, early 2018. But yeah, it was a really young company. A lot of people were recent grads. So I didn't feel an imposter syndrome at all. Like it was a comfortable work environment. And I wasn't, in a room with a bunch of people that were much older than me and further in their careers. So it was pretty comfortable to speak up. Like, of course, there were people further along in their careers on the engineering team and content teams. But a lot of us people that were working on the content team, like creating stories, we were similar ages. So I just felt comfortable speaking up. But yeah, if someone's not as comfortable speaking up, like definitely try to push yourself too, because I just usually feel comfortable speaking up. So yeah, definitely take those opportunities, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, like just push yourself to speak up, because it definitely gets noticed by managers. And then I know you weren't specifically asking about Pandora, but to like better answer your question, at Pandora, I don't know about imposter syndrome, but it was a different vibe, like walking into that. Cause I was one of the junior people on the team when I switched out of Snapchat to Pandora. And so I was one of the youngest. And I definitely felt like gender things and age things there. It was a lot more corporate at first. So I had to like, push harder or like step out of my comfort zone a bit more because it wasn't the same environment that I had been working in to like make my voice heard and bring my ideas to the table. So even though I wasn't comfortable, I like, spoke up and such. And then that helped me move up at Pandora as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I do want to talk about your experience at Pandora because I know you've changed teams and the like a couple of times. It really sounds like you took your trajectory in that organization in your own hands once you got comfortable. But I agree, and I think for the introverts in the room for whom it's not that easy to speak up, one tip I have is that when you're preparing for a meeting, if you know you're going to be in a meeting where you have an opinion or where someone may ask your opinion, or where there might be leaders in the organization present, think about a little bit what topics of conversation will come up. Write down notes about what your opinions are, or what questions you want to ask, or what assumptions you might want to challenge, so that you have that in front of you on a piece of paper, so that once the time comes when you feel like you should say something, you actually go for it and you have the words to say it. So, and then once you do that over and over again, you become more comfortable to improvise more so, and not necessarily have it in a notebook exactly when you're going to speak up. But again, it's so important. And time again, we've had 53 of these events, and time again, when we've had people who've been able to get promoted quickly, it's because they are proactive about speaking up, and they're proactive about being noticed. And I think that's really, really important. So thank you for sharing that, Katie. So you spent a year in Snapchat and then you moved on to Pandora. Can you tell us a little bit about how that opportunity came about?
Yeah, so I was in the job search process again. And after being at Snapchat for a year, and I was considering different tech companies. I knew I loved making content and stories, and I wanted to stay involved in the tech world. And Pandora was my other favorite app. Like, they're obviously different. Pandora's music and Snapchat was social media. So those are my two top apps. So when I got in the door there, oh, well, this is probably helpful people on the call. When I was starting my job search process again in early 2018, I knew a lot more about what I wanted, like more than the prior year. And so I was a lot more narrow in my search and targeted. And I had a friend who was a recruiter at Lyft at the time. And so I was getting her advice, as well as like people further in their careers, like higher up than me, getting their advice. And so my friend, though, who was the recruiter at Lyft, was like, make sure you got internal referrals at companies. So I like looked for NYU alumni on LinkedIn at like the top tech companies that I was interested in. And so I was just messaging them. I probably sent out like 20 or 30 like information interview requests messages on LinkedIn. I, of course, like got LinkedIn Premium, so I could send as many messages as I want. And so that's how I linked up with a recent grad at NYU who was working at Pandora, and she met with me. She was awesome. And she referred me to 3 roles. Like, I picked out 3 roles. I sent her a list. She was actually great. And she's like, yeah, I think these ones are best. So anyway, she submitted me for those roles. And so that's how I got into the Pandora interview process. I was interviewing other places as well. But yeah, I was really excited for the Pandora opportunity because as I said, like I love the app and I use it all the time to stream music. So yeah, that's how I got my foot in the door there. And then, I had to go through the whole interview process, of course. But yeah, did I answer your question? I forget exactly what your specific question was.
Yeah, no, certainly you did. I was curious about how the opportunity came about, and it sounds like you were very deliberate about getting those referrals. So yeah, folks, lean on your alumni network. Even if you don't know the alumni, reach out. They'll identify with you. They'll like the fact that you are also a grad of the same school and you want to emulate their careers. People want to be helpful. Do you recall, you said you reached out to like 20 or 30 people. Do you recall how many people responded to you?
Yes, I do. Because I told a lot of friends and family about it. They were asking me for advice. So I think I had like a 60% response rate. So definitely not everyone replied, but I was specifically just reaching out to NYU alumni. I think if you reach out to people you don't have something in common with, like the odds of them replying are much lower. But I mean, as Sergey said, like you identify with someone who went to your same college, et cetera, or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think it was like 65% response rate, somewhere in there, 60 to 70%.
Wow, that's huge. That's actually really, really solid. That's
yeah.
It makes sense why you had such a good response rate. I mean, I'm curious what you said in that message. Was it like was it custom for everyone, or did you kind of just like send something nice, but it was the same thing to everyone?
I honestly don't exactly remember the answer. I probably customized it because I remember putting a lot of effort into that job search process, but not like huge. I did not send them a novel. It was pretty short for each one of them. I had a paragraph that I, wrote and edited, and I made sure it looked good. And it was something like, I honestly don't remember what I said, but like, hi, I'm Katie. I went to NYU. Like, I saw you went there too. Like, I see you work at Fitbit. Like, I'm really interested in Fitbit. Like, would you mind, like, do you have 15 minutes to connect for an informational interview? Something like that. And I edited it out for each company and then person's name.
That's great. And you did that on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Like an request? Got it. Yeah. So that's super, I think that's super useful for people to know that you can see how deliberate, folks, this process was of outreach, trying to get referrals. You got that advice and then you doubled down on it. And I think that's really big. I'm curious, it sounds like you enjoyed your role at Snapchat and you wanted to be part of that organization. Why did you decide to leave after a year, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, definitely. They actually laid off my whole team. So I didn't choose to leave. It just happened. So all like 100 of us, got laid off. So that's why I was in the job search process again.
And this is sort of the nature of the beast, so to speak, right? If you join an organization that's growing quickly, the nice thing is you can get promoted quickly, like what happened to Katie. The not so nice thing is sometimes they grow too fast, they hire too many people, and then they have to lay folks off, not because they're awful companies, but because the growth they thought they were going to have perhaps didn't quite match up to how the market reacted to it, and they adjusted their needs. So it's unfortunate that your team was kind of the collateral damage there, and you were forced to kind of just a year after graduating pick up from scratch and start doing that job search again. But hey, folks, we have to be ready for that. That it can happen anytime in your career. It probably will happen multiple times. Certainly has happened multiple times to me as well. But I'm glad you were able to figure that out quickly. And so you started interviewing for those different roles, and you mentioned that you asked for a referral, and then you were able to get, like, from this one person send you 3 referrals. I'm curious, how did you ask for it, and like why were they so willing to blast the resume to everybody?
Well, so I actually specifically didn't ask anyone that I had the informational interviews with. I wanted them to offer because I didn't want to, I don't know, overstep. I don't know if it's wrong to ask, like you probably can. But I was going into it like to gain, information about the company, and I was hoping they would offer. And maybe my friend had given me that advice too. I don't exactly remember, but like out of the people who replied and then got on a call with me, they all offered except for one. I remember one didn't offer, and I didn't ask her. I was like, oh, okay. But I mean, we had a conversation. A lot of the calls were like, I don't know if they were as short as 15 minutes. I think a lot were like 30 minutes. And, I would ask them about the company, and then they would ask about me. And then they would say, oh, like, I'm happy to refer you if you want. And I've said that to a bunch of people too. So I'm thinking, they probably thought that I was good. And also everyone in tech like gets a referral bonus for referring someone. So if you have someone that comes to you and they seem good, it doesn't really hurt you at all to refer them, because you could get a bonus if they get signed. So
good point. Yeah, that's a good point. So somebody's making money off that referral if you actually get the job. And yeah, I mean, I think that, people know that when you're asking for an informational interview, you're curious about the company, but they know your motivation is to get into the company. You don't have to say, hey, I'm really looking for jobs right now. I would love for you to help me get a job at Pandora. You could just say, hey, I'd love to get, I'd love to talk to you in an over informational interview to learn more about what it's like to work there. They know why you're asking. And if they like you said, they will offer that referral. But how will they like you? Well, I'm sure you came to those calls, Katie, prepared. You did your research. You knew what questions you wanted to ask. You probably looked into their profile and knew what you wanted to learn about their specific experience. People love talking about themselves. So, you got to make sure that you ask about them and why they do the things they do. And that's what makes somebody come away from a conversation versus if you joined there and you had either no questions or bad questions that were not informed at all because you never did your research. So that you got to come off in the right way as well. And I do want to remind folks, Vadim just posted it in the chat there, but we're a little bit past the halfway point of the event. So please do drop your questions. Looks like Robert has the first question in there because we do want to make sure we ask the things that you guys want to make sure that's answered during this event. So let's take a look at Robert's question here. He's wondering what kinds of expectations the big tech companies have from when you first joined? Do they expect you to be an expert, on day one, or do they offer training resources, like workshops, etc.? So what are the expectations there, and how do you toe the line of, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm new, versus like, I want to be helpful right away?
Yeah, great question. I can give 3 different responses because starting at Snapchat was very different than starting in my first role at Pandora. And then once I switched to marketing, so those will probably all be helpful. So at Snapchat, they wanted you to be like an expert on the platform, right? But other than that, yeah, no, of course I didn't know what tools they had. It was all like, Snapchat is very private, because they're like a top, social media company. So they're like very secret. So no, I had no idea what tools they were using. I obviously couldn't see that before I got hired. So yeah, like they trained. I mean, I think there was a pretty short training at Snapchat. Honestly, you kind of like picked up, but you could ask questions. And so I think there was like a 1 or 2 day training, and then you just started your job, but there was always people there to ask questions, and you like learned it pretty quickly. And then when I started at Pandora, I started off in the advertising organization at first, before switching to marketing. And there was a very in-depth training there. So that was different than my other 2 experiences. But yeah, in that organization, I think the training was like 2 or 3 weeks or something. It was like this online thing. Like that was all I did before starting my job, was that training that they had set up. So that was definitely, and then I had to do like, I had check-ins. I had like a mentor. And so I would ask her questions from the training. So that was like very organized and like formal training. And there were some in-person sessions too. And then when I switched to the marketing organization, it was a lot more similar to my experience at Snapchat. There were definitely no formal trainings, and you kind of just learn as you go. But of course you had to have like the experience and then like market your experience to get the role. But then once you're in the role, like, yeah, you learn a lot on the job, from shadowing, and then kind of like learning as you do it, and then asking questions if you have questions. And I actually enjoyed that the most. I thought I wanted the formal training, and then I actually didn't like that one as much. I liked the first Snapchat experience and the marketing one the best. Like, it's kind of fast paced, and you learn as you go and learn from people. And then, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, I think that 100%, so much of the learning actually happens on the job. And that's what you should expect. You can learn everything you want about theoretically what could happen in a marketing role, but until you're in it and you're actually executing on it and seeing failures, seeing successes, you're not going to get a good feel for it. So that's a really good point. I do want to, so Chelsea, I'm going to get to your question in a second here, but before I do so, you mentioned, Katie, that you started off in one organization at Pandora, and then you switched about 6 months later again. And so I'm curious, first of all, I know from our conversation, earlier this week, that initial experience at Pandora was not what you expected, and perhaps you weren't quite as fulfilled in that role. But how do you navigate that change to get what you want as a relatively junior level person in an organization?
Yeah, great question. So I was so excited to come to Pandora. And then when I got into that role, like as Sergey just said, I didn't love it. And I realized that I didn't like it after about like 6 to 8 weeks. And so I spoke with my manager, because we had weekly check-ins, I think. And I told her that I was really interested. I loved Pandora and I was really wanted to stay, but I wanted to move long-term into product or marketing, because that was a lot more similar to what I've been doing at Snapchat, which I really enjoyed. And she was like, yeah, 100%, they like to keep, talent obviously within the company. So she completely supported it and was like, thanks for telling me. And she's like, yeah, like, let's make a plan. And, maybe after you're here for 6 months, start doing informational interviews with people in those orgs. And then, after a year, it's standard to switch out. So I was like, okay, great. And I kept putting, the time and work in my current role, enjoying certain things from it, of course, and learning. And then it came about much faster, because I think I joined the company in April, and then in August, there was a career pathing panel for my organization, like for the client services, like advertising organization. And a bunch of people went to it. I intended, of course, because I was interested in switching out. And the panelists were people that had started off in client services and then switched to other parts of the company. So there was someone from marketing, someone from product, and I think someone from creative. And I just loved the whole panel. And I got to see these people who had been at the company for like 3 to 6 years, and like their past and how they switched. And the marketing person told the whole group who was in attendance, like maybe it was like 50 or 100 people there. And she, gave her email, and she's like, if anyone wants to talk more, like I'm in town this week, so feel free to reach out. And so I like wrote her email down. And then I went up to the product person after because he didn't give his contact info. So I spoke with him, connected with him. And then I got back to my desk and I reached out to the marketing person, and she was awesome. She ended up being my boss, but she was like, yeah, like, let's get coffee tomorrow. So I was like, sure. So we met for coffee the next day. And I was honestly just going to like learn more about her story. So I'd only been there for like 3 months. And then I was talking about Snapchat, like my past experience. I think she was asking about it, and then she was talking, we both had been in CS in the same role. She started off in my role, and then she was a director at the time. And so we were both like, saying things we liked about the role and things we didn't. And I was not honestly trying to market myself at all. We were just like talking. And then she said, I don't know, like 30 or 40 minutes into coffee, she was like, oh, like there's a role on my team I'm hiring for, you should apply. And I was like, oh, because I, didn't want to go against what my current boss said. And she was like, yeah, you have to wait 6 months and do these informational interviews. And then after a year, you can apply. So I was like, oh, thank you so much. And like, she was showing me on the app, like what I would be doing. And it sounded really cool, but I just like didn't want to go against the guidance from my manager. So I like said, thank you so much. Like, I'll think about it. But then I was like, no, I'm not going to think about it. And I actually sent the role to someone else who wanted the referral to marketing. And I told her to apply, and she did. And then I like thought about it for a week, and I was like, I really want to go to marketing. Like, I probably shouldn't turn down this opportunity. So I read the description again. I was like, I'm super excited for this role. So I decided to apply for it. And I think I talked to my manager too, and like gave her a heads up, and she's like, yeah, no, I support that. So yeah, that's how that opportunity came up.
Yeah, that's so interesting how we talk ourselves in and out of things. You had this senior person who was literally telling you you should apply, but then you were so concerned about not being ready, not being there long enough, that guidance that you got from your manager, who obviously doesn't want to lose a good member of their team, that you should wait, that you gave the opportunity to somebody else first before you made up your mind to actually apply. So I think that's a great lesson to when you see, you kind of have to seize opportunity when you see it, or you get it rather, and not have blinders on talking yourself out of it for some arbitrary, maybe not arbitrary, but some reason that you've convinced yourself of. I think that's so important. And I love what you did. You knew that you wanted to change out of that team. It wasn't quite the environment or the work that you were fulfilled doing. And so you saw this panel and you showed up, and like, that's half the battle right there, showing up and then actually following up with the speakers of the panel, connecting with them. Again, like, folks, these opportunities don't happen by accident. You have to actually go after them. And it's not like you begged for a job, but you showed up and you put your best foot forward, and you made sure you built these relationships that then ended up in a very quick transition. And I think you mentioned to me a couple of days ago, it was like working for a completely different company, this new role. You felt much happier in it, right?
Yeah, 100%. It was, night and day. I mean, I was really excited because I got to work on the app and marketing the app that I love and use all the time. So it was a complete, change. I loved marketing.
That's great. So Chelsea wanted to know what is the day-to-day like of the role? What's a typical day look like? What does it actually mean to be in a growth role at Pandora? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, every day is really different, depending on what's going on. So my like recurring tasks or whatever, I have monthly campaigns that I run. And so I need to make sure I hit those deadlines to make sure they always go out on time. And then there's like BAU orders, like business as usual orders, which I are pretty standard, that I run month over month. And then I run test orders. So those are different. Like, I'll have to make different audience segments for them. I have to meet with the analytics and science team. So we plan the test structure appropriately and make sure we'll reach stat sig, like statistical significance, so we can use the learnings. And then, that's kind of like an ongoing process between the BAU orders and the test orders. And then when I get stat sig learnings, like positive stat sig learnings, if we found a new winner, then I edit the BAU orders and incorporate that into there. And we, change our BAU to be the new winners. So that's like one piece of it. And then I also look really closely at our creatives. So I have a specific like creative tiger team, and they're like assigned to the subscription marketing business. So I work with them. Like, they're awesome. They're great. Like, they have really cool ideas. And then I'll also like submit, like I'll have them do like their own. So sorry, let me just back up. So I used to submit like very specific creative requests, and I'd be like, this is what I want. Like, I think that this will perform well. Can you do this and that? And then I'm like, okay, these ones won. Can you make new versions of these? And then of course, like, they make them, I have to approve the copy, and then I have to approve the audio and the visual. And then, I mean, I only have so many ideas, and I also am like focused on other things too. And I'm like, well, these people are really smart. Like this is their job to make awesome creative. So now we do a combination of me submitting requests and then they think of their own things, like to get new ideas in there too. So yeah, they're awesome. I work really closely with them as well. And then, we have like team meetings. So I'm on like the house marketing team. There's people who market content and features. So we all meet, and then we have our client services team who runs our actual orders. That's actually the team I used to be on. Like we work with them, like we're their client kind of, because they are the ones who serve our ads on the platform. We meet with them to talk about frequency caps and delivery. And then I meet with my manager, obviously regularly, and then her manager. We all meet and talk about strategy. I have to reach out to higher ups for like approvals on specific things. It's a lot of like, I do the marketing strategy in the middle, and then there's all these teams that I like engage to reach the desired outcome. I also work with finance and PYM, like price yield management. We talk about what inventory we have and, what should go to me, subscription marketing, and then what should go to third-party advertisers where we'll make the business more money. So lots of conversations, lots of strategy, data analysis, and seeing what works and then pivoting there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, a lot of cross-functional collaboration happening all the time.
Yeah.
But then you actually have to do something with that work. And you mentioned data analysis a couple of times. You mentioned it's something that you did in college. It helped you land that initial role in Snapchat. And it's still something that you do a lot of. And I think that goes along to the question that Anna had, which is, what new skills do you believe will help content creators and people in growth marketing roles like yours right now stay relevant in 2022? You mentioned data analysis, perhaps that's one of them. I'm curious. So I guess to add a little bit of content, more to Anna's question, what new skills could people focus on if they want to get jobs like this? And then how can they go about actually making themselves marketable enough for the roles, let's say, if they haven't necessarily been in a marketing role before? Because, just saying that you did, you studied data analytics for some time may not be convincing enough.
Yeah, great question. So I think, yeah, data analysis for sure, like being able to understand what's performing well and pivoting from there. And to be honest, like I learned a lot of those skills in my roles. I did data analysis my senior year of college, but I definitely grew my Excel skills in the roles. And then, I have to give presentations a lot. So if that's something you do in your classes, like definitely getting comfortable. Not that I don't get nervous. I think everyone gets nervous, but getting comfortable, presenting, making your slides, making sure they look good, practicing them, like knowing your talking points, don't overwhelm the slide. It's pretty basic, but like have a few words and then have a lot to iterate on, and like get ready for like conversations from your deck. So you can speak to every point and you're the expert. Like someone told me that, like, so I'd be nervous. They're like, no, you know the most, like more than anyone else, like it's your topic. I'm like, true. So yeah, just, be comfortable presenting, making a deck that looks good and has good info in it, and info that you can speak to, and then data analysis. And then, I think everyone here is looking to get into tech, obviously. So like Sergey, you'd mentioned it before, like when you go, if you're reaching out to new companies or people that you want to get informational interviews from, like definitely be prepared for those calls. Sergey, you said this, but yeah, like read the person's LinkedIn bio, like know where they went to college, know if they did like extracurriculars, know what roles they've had, like what specific questions you have for them. And then also like when I met with my then who became my manager in marketing, like it was a very informal discussion when she suggested I apply for the role. And so I thought that the interview process would be informal like that, and it wasn't at all, but I was prepared, so it was fine. But yeah, like I had like numerous pages in Word, like all the potential questions, like Sergey, you had said, do interviews for practice, and like that's what my sales like tech sales interviews ended up being. And so I wrote down all the questions I got asked that I didn't have like perfect answers for, and then I like edited those answers and like took a lot of time like writing answers and like drawing from like my roles, like what experience would be good to answer that question and show that I can achieve whatever they're asking about. So yeah, just be like prepared, be over prepared, and have like different story scenarios to talk about.
Yeah, that's so important. I love that you actually really took notes on exactly what stories you would tell based on the question that you would have. I think that's so important. I'm curious, you mentioned how the process was way more formal than you had expected. Can you talk a little bit about that, of how was it more formal?
Yeah, so my boss at the time, or she wasn't my boss, she became my boss. She was really informal with me at coffee, and it was all fun. She's like, apply for this role. And then in the interview process, it was like a normal interview. She was like, okay, tell me about this, and da, 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 and like, no, like, whatever, like it had been really chill vibes and we were getting coffee. So it was a real interview. It was fine. Like she wasn't being rude or anything. It was just a normal interview. And so I don't honestly remember exactly what questions she was asking me, but yeah, it was just like a normal interview. And so I came like, I was prepared. So I answered all of her questions. And then I had to interview with, I think 5 or 6 people in marketing, including marketing analytics. They asked me about, A/B testing, this and that. So just be prepared. And then the person who was the most senior on the team, that interview was, he was the most like, I guess, least formal. And he's like, oh yeah, I heard that this person recruited you and da, 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 da. But, of course he asked me questions as well. So yeah, it was a regular interview process. Even though they had, suggested that I apply, it was like a full on interview process.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that sometimes we tend to think that, every organization has this like really predefined structure for how they do interviews. Ultimately, it ends up just coming down to who you're meeting with. Some people want to have that less formal conversation because they want to get to know you and are you going to be cool to work with? Some people actually want to know, hey, do you know your stuff when it comes to marketing? And you got to be prepared for both of those types of scenarios. And so I think that it sounds like you really were prepared. Asia also asked if you have any advice or thoughts about resources, online resources, maybe places you go when you want to stay fresh on the skills that you need to do your job well. Any thoughts around that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, when I was switching from advertising to marketing at Pandora, it was my first like post-grad marketing role. I know I had been an online marketing intern, so I, wanted to grow my skills there as well. So I went into LinkedIn Learning, and they have really cool courses that are engaging. So I took one of them, I got a certificate. I also just like personally have been interested in learning about positive psychology and other things. There's an app called Coursera where I signed up for a positive psych course, which is really awesome. So yeah, I would say LinkedIn Learning for sure has great courses specifically like for job growth, but Coursera, I only signed up for the one, like, because I was personally interested in the topic, but I'm sure they have other great courses as well. But the great thing about LinkedIn Learning is that when you complete a course, you get a badge on your profile, which I'm sure doesn't look bad. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And are there any like specific growth marketing websites or anything like that, or Slack groups or anything that you're part of? Maybe not necessarily growth marketing, but just generally stuff where marketers hang out?
Honestly, no, I don't have any like names to plug in that department. All my friends in marketing, like I work with them. So yeah, we're in Slack together, but we work together. So I don't know of any like specific marketing sites.
No worries. Yeah. Just thought I'd ask. And I mean, it sounds like you actually have an internal group of people that you consistently have a dialogue with to get better at your craft. And I think that's actually a great point too, whether it's inside your company or friends across different companies that you might have in these roles, kind of a mastermind where you meet with people and talk on a regular basis. I mean, we have, Vadim and I have one of those too, where we meet with other founders, especially of education companies and the like on a regular basis, who you can share best practices around. So you're not always just in your own head and you know exactly what's relevant. So I think that's really great. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions here. I see a question from Layla, and I think it's also a good one to ask because I think so many people are, when they're trying to make these decisions about what organizations to grow, we're very more, I think more now than ever, cognizant about joining organizations where the culture fits and resonates with us, with our moral compass, with the way we like to work and the like. And Layla was asking about the contrast between Snapchat and Pandora, what that transition was like, how the work environment was perhaps different, all the way from the leadership down to you, the individual contributor or your manager. So how were those environments different, and how, knowing what you know now, would you think about when you're making an evaluation, what company to go, what are important things to take into consideration?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so I'm thinking about how to best answer this. I don't think you honestly know what the culture is until you join. And I think the way to best know that is to ask, you can ask the people you're interviewing with, and sometimes they'll give you really like apt answers. Like I asked at a company, I was like, do you like working here? And the person was like, no, not really. And so I obviously didn't pursue that job, but I don't think that's very common that you would get that response. So I think the best thing to do, I talked to someone about this recently. I think the best thing to do is like reach out to people at the org and that you're not interviewing with, and ask them about it. Like on LinkedIn, if you know someone from your college who went there, if you have a friend or a family member who works there, because I think they would give you a more real answer than someone on your interview panel. But yeah, of course, and that's not always possible, right? So in your interview, like definitely ask about it. I've been doing interviews for marketing analytics roles, people who would like join and support me in subscription marketing. And I was surprised, like the last 2 ones did ask me that question. I had never gotten asked that in an interview before. So I think, yeah, people are really interested in this and like want to go somewhere where it's a good culture fit. And so I think like honest in my answer, and I really do like love the culture overall at Pandora for sure. Like I love marketing. It's really fun energy. And we're learning new things and iterating and experimenting all the time, which I really enjoy. So I think like you can also read between the lines in people's responses. Like I don't think most people would say what that one person had said to me, like, no, like I don't like working here, don't come here. Like I think that's pretty uncommon, but you can kind of, listen to their tone and their facial expressions, and you can like get a lot, right? They say like a picture is 1,000 words and a video is I don't know how many words. Like you can tell like from people's faces usually. But one time I was interviewing for a role and I got a great energy, and then I was in the role and it was not what I thought. So that kind of goes back to what I had initially said, where you don't always know, and then maybe talking to people not on your panel is more helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of impossible to guess what the culture will be like until you're in it, no matter what people say. But I agree, speaking with people who have worked there in the past is probably you're going to get the most honest answers. I want to ask one more question, actually, because you just brought it up. Because you are now in a position where you have more experience, you're starting to interview people for these particular teams or being on interview panels for these teams. So you're contributing to making these decisions. I'm curious if there's been a candidate who has surprised you because maybe her experience wasn't exactly what you guys have on the job description. Maybe she didn't check all of the boxes, but you still wanted to give that person a chance. Have you come across those situations where somebody maybe had a non-traditional background or didn't check all the boxes, but they still impressed you?
Good question. So I'm not in recruiting, right? So I don't choose the resumes. So the ones that ended up getting served to me always, I mean, I understood why they were getting referred to me and why we were interviewing them. So can't exactly speak to that. Like, someone who didn't meet all the criteria, like the resumes I was sent, the people I was interviewing, like they, seemed great and I saw why, but some of them are like recent grads and stuff, which I had been to, right? And we have people like, further along in their careers in similar roles. So they listed experience then in college and what they did. And like when they showcased like exactly what projects they worked on and like what impact they had, like that stood out to me and impressed me. And I mean, I managed, so this is for like the marketing analytics roles I've been interviewing for. I certainly wouldn't be their manager. They would work with me, but I was a manager for our summer intern a couple years ago. And so those people had less experience, obviously, right? Like they were in college. And one of them, she stood out. We ended up hiring her. She's awesome. She I think she was on the figure skating team at her college, which I thought was cool because I had figure skated. And she also, she went to Cal, like UC Berkeley, and she was doing marketing for Haas, I think, like for the business school. And I forget exactly like what she listed under that, but that impressed me, like they took initiative. She was doing a lot, even though she was an undergrad. So yeah, I would say just, write down like all of your accomplishments, like in roles that would relate, and then show like the actual output you did. I know like numbers are great to put on your resume, not just I did this, like show the actual output and stuff.
Yeah, I love that. The output, the impact you mentioned. So many people, especially junior level people, when they talk about themselves in an interview, they talk about the projects that they were on or the organization, what the organization was able to achieve. People are curious about what you did. What was your contribution, right? And so I think that's really important to stand out. And I love how that person, even they were just an undergrad, they were very specific about what projects they were in and what ownership they had. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And I think that's a good place to close this event. For me, the theme of this event was that a lot of ways that you get into these roles, a lot of ways that you get promotions in these types of roles. It doesn't happen by accident. And that's really what stood out to me about your journey. It's, you graduated relatively recently. We've had more senior people at our events as well in the past. And that's the common theme of, being deliberate about how you communicate about yourself, about who you reach out to get these opportunities, how you stand out in a meeting, et cetera, is so important. So I do appreciate you walking us through that. I think that's really spot on. So thank you so much, Katie Weidmann, for joining us here for this event. We're really thankful for what you were able to share. Really quickly, folks, Vadim is going to drop the survey link here on the bottom, I think in about a second, but if you go to school16.co/survey, we'd love to hear from you. It takes 1 second. We don't want to be one of those annoying people or companies that ask for surveys all the time, but we read every single response and want to hear how this event went so we can improve them for you in the future. Please follow us on socials at school16.co on Instagram, and you can find us if you just type in School16 on LinkedIn. We post very actively there. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to hear from you. We have amazing events coming up. We're going to take a few weeks off during the holidays, but we have another event coming up in January with a product ops leader at Shopify. And the way you can find out about all these is by going to School16, subscribing, and going to our socials as well. Again, Katie, thank you so much for joining us here today. It was so great to hear from you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. And folks, Vadim posted some of those links on the bottom there, but thank you so much for joining us as well. And we'll see you all in a couple of weeks at our next event. Cheers. Bye, everybody.